So welcome to Talking Tech with Legal IT Insider. I'm your host, Caroline Hill, and our webinar today, we're talking about why legal AI fails and building a defensible data foundation. So you all know that while 2025 may have been the year of AI adoption, many law firms are finding that AI initiatives struggle to progress not because the tools are inadequate, but because the underlying data can't be trusted. And today, to unpick this subject in some great detail is Errol Rodericks, a marketing director at Denodo, which is a Silicon Valley headquartered data integration platform. Welcome, Errol.
Thanks for having me here. It's good to be here.
Thanks
Hello,
so
everyone.
much. Yeah, thanks so much for joining me. So in the webinar, we're going to take a frank and critical look at some of the issues that disrupt legal sector trust and result in half-baked outcomes. I do love that expression, and it's very accurate in terms of the outcomes. And also Denodo works with the financial services sector. We can also potentially weave in some best practice takeaways and learnings from there. In terms of the agenda, so I know a lot of you like to know what's coming. So we're going to be looking at the reality. So AI is gaining momentum, but where are law firms getting stuck in practice? I love the very practical element of this webinar today. We're going to be looking at trust issues, why trust is such a critical element for AI. We're going to be looking at operational impact, so where law firms are feeling the pain of fragmented data. We're going to be talking about from a practitioner perspective, which is great. So Denodo have worked with BCLP, so we'll be taking a look at some of the public domain outcomes there, which is super helpful. I always enjoy having that, weaving in that end user experience. We're looking at the question that every firm asks. I might not even tell you what that is. We'll come to that. And then a look ahead at what law firms should prioritize now if they want AI to deliver real value. Errol, before we dive in, so you've worked in the legal sector, is it 2.5 years? And before that, you've been at big companies like ServiceNow, HP, and Boomi.
Right.
Is legal very different?
Well, it's the application of data to legal that we've been working in, but it is different. Yes, I mean, let's put it this way. I mean, when you talk about the legal sector, we're talking about a sector that focuses on being able to stand behind what they call truth. And therefore, the firms that are making the most meaningful progress, they're the ones who understand that, we're talking about a sector that needs to stand behind its data, everything it does. So from that point of view, it is different. It's a lot more discerning and a lot more strict, if you like, about truth, about what's provable, what's explainable. So it is different.
So, apologies for that audio. I've got everything muted, so I'm not quite sure how there was some audio disturbance there. But I'm really loving this conversation, because in every conversation I have around AI projects, data inevitably comes up. And I should jump in and say at this point that if you're in the audience and you also if something resonates with you, please do post in the chat. Obviously, we've had a couple of people post already where you are, but we really want this to be interactive, and Errol's very comfortable with that. So please do jump in with your questions as you go, and I'll come to them as we go, because I know this is a topic quite genuinely that is top of people's minds. So what AI is gaining momentum, as we said. People are getting stuck. What's happening? In broad brush terms, what are you seeing in terms of the issues arising? Is people think that they have the right tools, but potentially, but perhaps they overlook some of the data work that needs to be done. Tell me what you're seeing, Errol.
Yeah, I mean, you said it well there. I mean, firms are getting stuck. They're not getting stuck on the AI tools, though. The AI tools are doing their job. Where they are getting stuck, and what we're finding, is when those tools have to operate across different environments, fragmented data, what they run into is inconsistent governance. strict confidentiality rules being broken because these AI tools are operating across different domains. So most pilots, when they run pilots, they succeed because they run in a very confined environment. But most pilots that succeed technically stall operationally when they try and put them into production because firms cannot guarantee that the data feeding these models is complete, is current, and more importantly, is permitted for use across different matters of or jurisdictions. So when lawyers cannot trust the inputs, they cannot rely on the outputs. So legal AI doesn't stall because the models are weak. It stalls because the data beneath them isn't trusted. And
Yeah.
many firms have already successfully demonstrated AI in isolated environments where they work, and things like this may ring true to some of you listening. Document summarization, contract review, clause searches. When they struggle is to scale those pilots into daily operational workflows that they can stand behind. So that's what's really happening. When you bring it all together, it's the data that fails, not the AI tool.
Yeah. And we're not necessarily focusing on tools today, actually, but as people start to look more at agentic AI, this is going to become even more pronounced.
Yes. Agentic AI impacts exactly what I just said. When you bring it all together, you've got operations going across different domains within the legal sector. And if you're going to trust agents to make decisions automatically for you, you need to be absolutely sure that you've got a solid data foundation to work from.
Is this different? So we said we'd weave context throughout. So is this a specific problem, these silos of data and lack of integration? Is this particular to legal? Is it particularly bad for legal?
So it's not just legal that experiences this, but it's most pronounced in legal environments. And like I said, law firms operate in one of the most trust-sensitive environments of any industry. Every decision, every recommendation, every figure presented to a client must be defensible, more so than in any other vertical. So it doesn't just have to be accurate, it has to be explainable, permission aware, and compliant with things like confidentiality obligations, ethical walls. So that raises the bar significantly compared with any of the other sectors adopting AI.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because you don't really have the same privacy and confidentiality rules that
Yeah.
that in other sectors.
Yes,
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because we're going to come on to talk about trust. And I know that one of the issues is around practitioners. We one of the things that we're seeing a problem is with adoption, and one of the reasons behind that is because practitioners don't trust the data and they have a lot to lose. Again,
Oh,
is that more pronounced in legal? I feel like, every sector has to be able to rely on the data. Obviously from a legal perspective, you give a legal advice, you need to know that it's trusted and that it's accurate. We've seen a lot of issues around this over the last sort of very rapidly changing 2-3 years. Is this pronounced particularly for legal practitioners, do you think?
well, there are other verticals where you do need the trust. Take the healthcare or the life sciences, pharmaceuticals industries, lives are at stake there. So you do need to be able to rely and trust the data you're using. But let's put it this way. In law, any answer they give, an answer that cannot be defended, it's quite simply an answer that cannot be used. Their whole operation comes to a grinding halt if there's no trust. It's not a feature of legal AI, it's the foundation. So legal AI absolutely survives on trust. Legal AI must survive not only on at the decision moment, so they'll make decisions based on that data, but at the audit moment, because as you know, trust needs to last a long time in the legal sector. So it's not just what happens right now, but what happens further down when they look back at decisions that were made, at judgments that were made. Um, that's where trust really weighs in. So trust in the legal sector is slightly different to some of the others. In the financial services area, you're talking about money. In pharmaceuticals and healthcare, you're talking about lives, well-being of people. And in law, you're talking about the profession itself, the whole industry. The whole industry depends on trust. And once again, if they cannot defend an answer, they simply cannot use that answer. And
Yeah.
therefore,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah, and so from a fragmentation, I want to drill down into this. So I spend a
sure,
lot of time talking about trust,
yeah,
and often it comes up in the context of we've seen it in many different ways. We've seen it with hallucination, right? So can you rely on the accuracy? Then we start talking about humans in the loop and all of that. But you're talking about it specifically within the context of the data layer, right? So tell me about the trust issues. Tell me about the issues specifically that might damage trust when you're talking about your world specifically.
So when you pull all of this data together, and you do have to pull it together eventually, depending on what it is you're doing, and it can cover a number of use cases, like establishing ethical walls. You're talking about putting pitches together if you're a large legal firm. The trust issue comes in when you are looking at data from very many different sources. So let's look at what those sources might look like. They fall into three categories. The first is your core data. This is legal databases, maybe transactions that have happened in the past, records that you have on a client or to do with a case. And when you actually have this data and it's static, it's in a database somewhere or some kind of centralized data repository, you can go to certain extent to certain estimates, if you like, of just how trustworthy that data is. But generally, because it's static, you can ensure the trustworthiness. But once you actually extend that, remember I said there were three different sources. So the core sources, yeah, there might already be a certain level of trust. They might be in the form of lake houses or data warehouses. You may have analytic tools working on them already and delivering just on that core data reasonably trusted outcomes. The other two, it's when you get into the extended data, the legacy data, the data that doesn't normally sit within your lakehouse for various reasons, whether it's sovereignty or whether it's the legacy of it. So it might be old systems that exist. Then you need to be sure that you can access this data from where it is without needing to pull it into a centralized repository. So that's one. The third category, which is also important, is real-time data, transient data, data that doesn't stick around long enough to be pulled into any lakehouse. And this is data that you're making decisions on the fly in real time, but needing to do it and treat it with the same trust that you do any other data. So it's got to be governed. It's got to be explainable. You've got to be able to track its lineage and say, I made this decision based on transient data that was available at exactly this time, and this is how we ensured that this data was usable. So when you take all of those different sources of data, and from a tools point of view, there are lots of software applications that exist separately to provide that data, maybe. But when you actually want to use that in an integrated way, in a unified way, that's where you need to have a very strong data foundation that's based on trust, based on inbuilt guardrails, inbuilt explainability, inbuilt traceability, and inbuilt governance to say, yes, we are compliant with whatever legislation is there. So when you need that, that's when you need a slightly different foundation. And it's not your average data lakehouse or warehouse or centralized repository of any kind. It's a combination. And that's why a unifying layer that can be trusted is absolutely critical. You're not going to achieve any of the outcomes that you're looking at, driving without that layer of trust. So, I mean, we've looked at use cases for different types of law firms, and they range, from the very large ones who are dealing with mergers and acquisitions or corporate finance or who have high visibility cases that they're dealing with. So like your traditional firms in what some people refer to as the magic circle. So whether it's cross-border data governance or it's AI-ready knowledge management, we've seen many mergers and acquisitions, due diligence, data integration, financial regulation, all kinds of things. Now that's at the very largest level. You go through to the next layers of legal firms. You have multi-jurisdiction litigation readiness, sector-specific compliance dashboards, and so on. But I can talk ad infinitum on these use cases. And this goes down to the smaller firms in the high street, that also have a need for trust. And when you're talking about the data sources for this, unified data is absolutely key. So that gives you an idea of the kind of data that we're looking at, the kind of use cases that they're addressing, and the fact that you need the unified view. That's what trust is about, being able to trust that unified view.
Yeah. For people listening in, if you want to jump in on, I'd be keen to know where you feel the pain most in terms of fragmented data, whether it's in pitches, in billing, compliance, day-to-day operations. By all means, I won't have to read your name out. Like, just jump in and let me know. Where are you feeling the pain most of untrusted or fragmented data? I'd love to know your thoughts. What do you see, Errol, like in terms of where the pain is felt the most?
Well, most recently, we were looking at a firm and they were preparing a proposal. That proposal needed client billing history. That sat somewhere. They needed prior matter experience. That sat in a separate repository somewhere. They needed regulatory insights, which were changing quite fast. And they needed some benchmarking information for the sector of the client they were dealing with. So when those sit across disconnected systems, that's where they start to really feel, they spend hours reconciling spreadsheets rather than advising clients. And the cost is not just in time, they've lost responsiveness and missed opportunities. So that's where they sort of suddenly say, okay, that's enough. We don't want to go through that again. What do we need to do to remove the fragmentation and have a unified view that is trusted? And that last phrase, that is trusted, is as important as the phrase unified. There's no point having a unified view that's not reliable. So that's where we're seeing it. They've got billing histories, matter experience, regulatory insights. These are all different kinds of data.
Yeah, of course, of course. Tell me if that resonates with you. Let's talk about so I meant it when I said I love talking about the end user, and you've had a case study out with BCLP that I've listened to, and
Right.
So talk me through that. So BCLP, that it was it was a big transformation exercise, and which you were a big part of. Just talk me through it.
Sure. Well, as you know, BCLP is not a small company; they're quite a large company, and they wanted to achieve a trusted unified data foundation. That's the start. And if we only ever looked at that from a technical point of view, we got them off to a flying start. They could actually unify all of their data. They could trust the data they were pulling in together. But here's where it came into its own, and this is where we started to actually see the real value for BCLP. So first of all, they were looking at pitch acceleration and panel reviews, the challenge they faced there. Requests for pitches, panel submissions often required pulling together all kinds of client history, billing data, ESG commitments, past matter experience, etc. So we could unify finance, subject matter, CRM, ESG data into a single view. And that was in minutes. We removed the time to do that from days to minutes. So faster, sharper proposals. That was one. Then they were looking to implement ethical walls, query time governance. So managing confidentiality rings across mergers and acquisitions, litigation, and all of that. And again, they wanted to reduce compliance risk. automate the client confidentiality obligations, and also improve auditability. So that was the second tick, and so on. The third one was to do with billing transparency and profitability tracking, even into the finance department, sort of accounts receivable, cash flow optimization, AI-ready defensible outputs, of course, regulatory and ESG reporting, always true for most industries, but also optimal resource allocation. Allocating the right mix of lawyers and staff to matters is critical for profitability, but also HR, billing, and workload data is brought in, and all of this is siloed. And then it goes on. There's Matter and Client 360, knowledge management, precedent research and search. They wanted to implement a client trust dashboard. So this is the sort of thing that BCLP could build on, having established this unified trusted data layer. And that's where Denodo and BCLP formed a very good partnership. I don't know if I explained that properly, but
You did great. Yeah, I listened. So there was a case study with it was Ben Legg, wasn't it? Senior Data
Ben Legg,
Architecture
yes.
Manager. Yeah. And he was saying, so yeah, you explained it perfectly. So it was just interesting to hear him talk about the obstacles. So
Sure.
you've explained it. I don't really need to reiterate, but so he was talking about the data silos, information in different systems and geographies, because as you explained, they're massive. Compliance and visibility, confidentiality, you've just explained, and the speed. He also, going back to a point that you made earlier, the speed, he talked about the three issues that he highlighted. The speed of and the ability to make decisions quickly was a key issue for them. And it was interesting because he said, maybe I think this is very significant, and we have already touched on it a little bit. But one of the things that I really took away from the podcast with him, he said about that we needed a way to address the issues without moving the data.
Very important. Yeah, I mean that is one of the number one considerations all of you listening should take into consideration, which is you don't need to rebuild, reinvent, move big chunks of data around to achieve the outcomes you need. Just need to be able to unify that access to that information, unify the access to that information in a trusted manner, in a demonstrably trusted manner. So you can show, lineage. You can track where the data came from, how it was used. You can track that it obeyed any model context protocols that said this is how you are allowed to use this data. All the semantic side of it. So, and that was big for Ben. Yes, absolutely. And, it made life easier as well. I don't know if you've ever sat through trying to put together something as simple as, but, the trust and governance needed behind a regulatory ESG and sustainability framework. You've got to make sure that everybody or every department in your firm is complying with the sustainability and ESG directives, and it's very hard to keep track of that. Now, if you had a means of automatically pulling that in, populating the dashboard, keeping auditors happy, keeping everybody happy, that's a high value data product that you'd pull in, and it is called a data product because it's a product that they use. So yeah, big one for him. Not tearing down what he has, not having to move big chunks of data into some centralized repository, which would take time, money, and would not be effective in time anyway. So yeah.
When we do our feature gazing, I don't know if anyone listening in thinking about MCP, but we're going to come on to that. Because obviously we're fascinated to get Errol's take on that. But so I said we look at the question that every firm asks, which you say is most firms already have CRM, billing, document and reporting systems. So why can't they achieve this with what they already have? Just tell me a bit more about that.
Sure. I mean, this is the first thing we run into all the time at Denodo. We've got all this. We've got access to this data. Why can't we just achieve the outcomes we need reliably with what we have? Well, it's actually quite a simple answer, but it needs to be explained. So the systems that they have, that they claim to have, whether it is CRM or it's document management or whatever systems they're using, Those systems are designed to manage individual processes, not to create a consistent, governed enterprise view across the firm. So as a result, firms rely on exports or copies or manual reconciliation, all of which introduce delays, more importantly, introduce inconsistencies and huge governance gaps. You can't track this, you can't say with surety where that came from, or whether you were in fact allowed to use it in the way you've used it. So while they have all these tools and all these data systems in place, they're not designed to present the enterprise view that these people need, and it has to be a consistent and governed enterprise view. So, AI and analytics, even the advanced analytics, they require real-time, permission-aware access across multiple systems simultaneously. And traditional reporting approaches, they were built for periodic analysis, not operational decision making. So most firms, they have systems of record, which is what they call them. What they don't have is a trusted view across those systems. And their current reporting typically shows yesterday's truth. AI needs today's truth. So that's the difference there. So while they have all these tools, they talk about yesterday's truth. They're talking about not an enterprise view. And enterprise insight starts to fail. And it's not failing because these systems are missing, they're there, but because the meanings across them are inconsistent. And therefore they can't. Um,
How
yeah,
many firms
I,
you talked about Magic Circle and High Street, and obviously they both have similar objectives, but would you say presumably there's more of the larger firms are already doing work in this space, as opposed to
yes,
they obviously have, it's true to say that they're both equally as important, but
sure.
clearly in Magic Circle, or the big international law firms, they've long struggled with data issues. They've long struggled with having to have visibility, and the sheer size and the growth, the by either by mergers sometimes, or they've data is a perennial issue, and also they know that it's kind of gold. It's often referred to as oil or gold, but so is this, but presumably a lot of them have been making quite good headway, and what is it they're missing, would you say? Is it because they've got very hugely capable people
Sure.
working for them?
They've got capable people and they've got capable people who work very hard to reconcile all the different views. We just make it easier for them,
Yeah,
much more trusted, much more automated. So let's take a typical use case from one of Magic Circle's top players, and you know who they are. The Clifford Chancellors and the Claters and all of that.
yeah,
There's quite a few of them. Um, so let's look at where they, where this whole thing stands up. They look at cross-border data governance. They do this all the time because they are truly multinational. So they're enforcing jurisdictional data access controls across global offices. Now, that is actually a nightmare to put together without having the trusted view, real-time view, without moving the data off these systems. And it came into its own, like I said recently, was when we were looking at mergers and acquisitions, and they were trying to perform due diligence data integration, and they're supporting mergers and acquisitions. Now that's real-time aggregation of contracts, financials, compliance records, the list goes on. Do they do that? Yes. Does it take them time to do it? Yes. Can it be error prone? Yes. Do they 100% trust what they're presenting? They can't, because they can never be sure if what they've got is truly trusted, governed. Now, when you put those guardrails, you build that into the very way you actually access the information, the meaning of the information, without moving the data. Suddenly, that's a big plus for them. It's a big plus for them in terms of performance and reliability and profitability, and the list goes on. And then something as simple as financial regulation compliance analytics. They need to monitor, analyze, report on various compliance requirements, SRA, FCA, ESG. These are all different sets of requirements. Trying to do this in anything less than a unified governed way, even though there's a degree of automation in the software they use, it can never be unified and trusted in the way it needs to be. So
Yeah.
that would be at the top end. That would be, at the as you say at the magic circle end of things. If you go all the way down to the smaller companies, etc., they also have the need for AI-ready knowledge management. They need to unify precedents that have taken place in the past. They need to unify research just as much as anybody else, and they have the need to have internal knowledge for their co-pilots, their smaller AI projects. Do they get involved in mergers and acquisitions? True, they do sometimes. Real-time aggregation of contracts, and they also have compliance requirements. So I just went from the largest to some of the smallest and everything in between. If I looked at some of the more specialized firms, and they'll be sector focused, they'll be dealing with things like intellectual property that have a different set of requirements, but they all need the unified trusted data.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like there's in the same way as AI has become obviously something that everyone has to adapt for. I also feel like there's been perhaps a cultural shift. So traditionally, in terms of analytics and being able to really reap the benefits of analytics, I know there are some firms who've been doing it brilliantly for a long time, but I feel that culturally, law firms, there's there's been a resistance to it, in terms
Yeah,
of, and that comes at lots of different levels, whether it be being frank with you, we are, when it comes to like things like case management, just for example, off the top of my head, we're not with I don't mean to be, I am being disparaging actually on purpose, so I'm just going to say it. So we are very high level, not process driven beings, we are very unique, and I feel like actually what's playing to this is not just AI, but perhaps a cultural shift, and some of that
yeah,
is coming down to pricing. I think that, so there's pressure on pricing, there's pressure on the revenue, because obviously it's being squeezed, and I think that there's a whole load of factors coming to play right now in terms of, right, we need to really understand our data. We need to actually acknowledge that we need to do more better analytics, because we are, although we're special, amazing, clever people, actually at the end of the
yeah.
day, we have to deliver extra value. I think that's something that's really interesting for me that's coming out right now.
Yep, that's absolutely true. So let me give you my perspective on this at least. But, profitability always plays into everything. So that goes without saying. Expect legal firms to be profitable and to be trusted. But when we see success, whether it's a very large firm or it's a small firm, the first change we look for and we see is behavioral. It's the way they behave. Okay, and what goes hand in hand with that is trust. But you know, in the more successful firms, they spend less time assembling data, and they spend more time acting on it. That means they have to trust it. So with governed, unified access in place that they trust, they will easily move from manual reporting to self-service insight. Now, you say self-service to some legal firms, and they'll say, I don't trust it. I need to verify it myself. Bring me all the source documents. Let me see. That's what we do for a living. So it's sometimes hard to accept that that part of their practice is going to be replaced by AI eventually. Uh, but it doesn't mean it's taking their job away. It's freeing them up to do what they should be doing, which is acting on the data rather than assembling the data. Um, so there is a behavioral and therefore cultural aspect to this. Uh, the ones that are truly pressurized by the volume of data they're dealing with the speed at which they have to perform, that culture change comes pretty quick, especially when they start seeing the first successful results. Some firms, as you said, they lag behind. I won't say they're laggards, but they lag behind because of the cultural change that needs to happen.
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening slowly in some areas, but it's happening
Yes.
quicker than ever I've seen before, which is, it's interesting. So let's look ahead. So just coming into our last sort of 10 minutes. So I've got a few questions actually, but I'm going to so start off with what law firms should prioritize now if they want AI to deliver value. I'm then going to come on to actually, let's do MCP first because I feel like perhaps what law firms should prioritize now is like a nice takeaway. But I feel like, in terms of that, the piece that we were just talking about with being able to integrate different systems, your what you do. People might say, oh, MCP, I can do everything using MCP now. I think there's a lot of people super much more clever than me, people who understand MCP, but also there's a lot of people that think MCP is going to achieve things that perhaps it's not going to achieve. Tell me what you think. So could it be a solution to help? Is it a solution to help people solve some of the issues that you're talking about?
I wouldn't say it's a solution, it's guidance.
Mm.
So model context protocol simply says that there is a protocol for how certain types of data could and should be used in certain contexts. Set up your context protocol. It should guide anybody making use of data and AI automatically. But MCP will fail without the inbuilt guardrails that governance and trusted data provides. So we welcomed, MCP into the fold because it gave us a structural format or some sort of protocol, if you like, for implementing the business use cases that we've come across. Whatever it was, whatever the legal firm's trying to do, they needed to be able to stand behind what they were using, and they needed to know that there was some guidance that said, I am using this data in the right way. Now, that's the very essence of semantic data layers. That when you're accessing data without moving it centrally, the meaning of that data and the trusted usage of that data come into play. So you can't not centralize data but have no governance. Now, if you have the governance, then the context protocol, the model context protocol, makes it easier to use AI tools because it says, this is what you can use this data for, this is how you should use this data, this is what you cannot do. But without having the right data foundation to work with, they'll just be sort of saying, well, I'm not sure about this. I can't vouch for the quality of this data. And they need to be able to vouch for the quality of the data before they even deploy MCP solutions of any kind or guidance. So MCP gives you guidance. It gives you a structured way to look at data, but you still need to be able to trust that data. And so there's something that sits under MCP. That's the unified semantic layer of data that you need to access before you can then start effectively using MCP protocols combined with LLMs, combined with all of the other technology to then start getting the right insights, and more importantly, to start enabling the right agents to work independently and in a trusted way. Once you get that going, once you get those two things going, the right insights, the right agents, all based on a trusted layer, overseen by an MCP protocol, then yes, as the expression goes, you're cooking with gas. So,
Yeah. Just real quick, there are also people that so I've had a lot of conversations about that in the context of DMS and people assuming that using MC the interesting, probably most interesting work I've seen has been connecting DMS actually to outside LLMs, but people seem to assume that it will automatically create semantic search, which obviously it will not.
Dangerous assumption.
Dangerous assumption. So but then the other assumption that I see real quick is that AI can fix the problems or do you see this a lot, like AI will fix, we don't need to worry too much about data perfection anymore because AI will fix it. I come across that quite a bit.
Yeah, well, as you probably know, AI doesn't fix things, it points things out and then it acts on those things, but it still needs the data to be trusted. So this is where, if I were to advise any companies going forward, they need to recognize and realize where the real shift is happening now. And the real shift is not just in the adoption of really good AI tools. It's the recognition, and this is really important, that all legal firms do this. They recognize that trusted data is becoming a strategic asset for law firms. It's not well, it'd be nice to have, and we'd like to have some governance, wouldn't we? It's a necessary asset. A trusted data layer is an absolute necessity for law firms. Then and only then can AI tools, and I say this with heavy inverted commas, fix things. It'll automate things. It'll give you some good insights, but actually you do need this trusted data layer to be able to do whatever it is you need to do.
Yeah.
So the layer needs to determine how quickly they can respond to clients, how confidently they can operate across jurisdictions. So it's the speed, it's the confidence that they're looking for, and the effectiveness, how ultimately how effectively they can compete in an increasingly, if you like, data-driven legal market. So that is a necessity, that layer. It's not the adoption of AI tools. AI tools won't automatically fix things, and as you know, it could actually very much destroy things, make things worse. And assumptions like, well, if I use this LLM with some MCP protocol, they say built in, it should take care of all of my governance issues. That's dangerous. You need to be much more active in ensuring that whatever data you access, wherever from, that it is governed and it's trusted.
I've seen it work well with things like enriching data, adding metadata. It can be really. I don't want to be seen to be downplaying the ability of AI to improve, because you can do some really
Yes.
clever, important work, can't you, around metadata and
Yes,
that
you can.
yeah, and that's I mean that's helped save a lot of time, so not to downplay that. Tell me, what should law firms prioritize now? We've got just a couple of minutes, so to sum up, what
Sure.
should law firms prioritize now? Give us like sort of 3 takeaways for people to go, right, I came away from this webinar with these 3 takeaways, perhaps.
Well, I'd almost repeat the same thing 3 times, but yeah,
Okay.
the first thing is establishing a unified, trusted data layer. Okay. Without that, all the clever stuff that AI can do for you will be suspect. So make sure that you understand that you need to adopt a unified, trusted data layer. And then from then on, it's to make sure that your access to data is complete. Not only is it trusted, it needs to be complete. And like I said, there are 3 main categories of data that we come across. There's the core data, whether it's research, whether it is case case law related or whatever. That's core. But then in addition to core, there's the extended data and there's the real-time stroke transit data. Make sure you're covering all 3, not just one, because one will lead to results, but 3 will lead to highly effective, better results. So not only a unified trusted data layer based on semantics, but also completeness of your coverage of data. And then finally, focus on the outcomes, focus on the outcomes you're trying to achieve, and understand that this is going to be something that unifies all of the software that you're using within the ecosystem. So whether it's data knowledge management, whether it is document management, whether it is something as simple as constructing acceptable emails, and also anything more sophisticated like you might use in a mergers and acquisitions environment. So you've got a variety of software that needs to be unified. You've got a unified data layer that you need to trust to feed that, and you need to make sure that that data layer encompasses all of the types of data, not just one type, the core data. You need the extended and you need the real-time stroke transient data.
Yeah.
Those 3 things.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. Everyone's listening very intently, obviously. So thank you, Errol. We've come to time, sadly. I think this is I'm looking forward to revisiting this conversation with you further down
So
the line. This year, I think, is going to be a fantastic and challenging year for a lot of firms. It's certainly already started out that way, and I know that data is going to be one of the predominant themes again this year. So I really appreciate you making the time, and to people listening in, thank you so much for making the time as well.
thank you. Yeah, I firmly believe this is going to be the year that legal firms, really move forward.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yes. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks for your feedback. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for
Cheers.
joining us. Really nice to see everyone. Appreciate it. Take care.